EAFC, one of the hardest games to defend in any year previous. This game has caused many broken controllers and, of all years, has caused the most frustration out of the FIFA community I have ever seen. We've had people delete the game early. Views have dropped across many different YouTubers in the EAFC scene, and it's gone as far as various popular YouTubers boycotting the game, causing a revolution and leaving it completely. And with many development companies looking to release their own version of FIFA in the coming years, as well as FIFA themselves with the makers of 2K, EA Sports, you simply need to get your shit together. With that being said, your boy has always had you covered no matter what goes on in the EAFC, aka FIFA community. And today I'm breaking down how to defend in every single area of the pitch so you can have a defensive strategy moving forward in this game despite all the struggles that you have gone through all year. First up, how to defend in your opponent's own half. We have right stick switching, we have the run up switch off technique, and the squeezing technique. First up, we have right stick switching, a staple in any high caliber player's defense, and from now on should be a staple even more so in your defense. Right stick switching entails you flicking the right stick towards any player that you desire on the pitch so that you can actually defend with any player in your formation. And this is significant for defending in your opponent's own half because, as you will come to know, it is so important that you press high up and pressure your opponent, and having the ability to wrap your defenders around the attackers on the ball, aka the defenders per se in your opponent's half, to squeeze them and suffocate them. But we're getting into that in just a moment's time. However, speaking of the devil, right stick switching, you need to simply implement this into your game in, game out. And as I have explained in previous tutorials, right stick switching is one of those things where it's up to you to actually implement it into your game. It took me personally many years to perfect this technique, and before you get the speed of right stick switching, you need to first get the accuracy, and that only comes with time and practice. However, if you have been a long time follower of this channel, I no doubt believe you have perfected right stick switching, as I have mentioned it in nearly every single video on this channel. Technique coined by myself in FIFA 22 when I started my FIFA coaching academy. Essentially, it was coined the run up switch off technique simply so people could easily understand the importance of not controlling a single player, but in fact controlling multiple players at a given time by constantly switching between all players at once. And you'll see this when defending in the opponent's half. A high caliber defender will run towards the initial attacker on the ball and then switch off to a secondary defender to essentially go and cover a pass inside or even outside. And they'll also bear in mind what direction the opponent is dribbling or taking a touch as they receive the ball in, because that will be a good indication as to where they'll go next. And I have actually mentioned this before in a previous video, where a good way to read your opponent is from the touch direction. They take a touch inside, it's a good indication that they will most likely find a pass inside to that attacker, so you can predetermine that pass and be a step ahead, be more proactive in the defense and switch inside to a defender predetermined to then put pressure onto the attacker who is most likely going to receive the ball. From there, you can either switch between the two of the defenders, putting pressure onto those attackers, or you can switch to a third defender and anticipate a pass into another attacker or cover the space that is available. And a primary example of this may be when your opponent is using the wingback and they look to take a touch back inside. This is a lot of the time a good indication they're going to switch the ball, so you could incorporate the third defender, aka one of your wingers, to then run straight towards the wingback on the ball. Last but not least is squeezing and suffocating your opponent. No, we're not literally suffocating them. However, what we should be focusing on is surrounding the opponent so that we cut off all of their options and give them no breathing room. And yes, you guessed it, this can be done with the help of right stick switching and running up and switching off, as well as a little bit of second man press. The way you want to squeeze your opponent is by running up with the first defender, switching to a second defender and running towards the attacker on the ball, then switching to the third defender and running to the nearest passing option and repeat, all while holding holding second man press. This ensures you put enough pressure onto the ball carrier, all while cutting off their nearest passing options. And this is exactly how pro players manage to squeeze you off the ball, as well as other high caliber players when they're playing in the high divisions or in a pro tournament. You may have played one before and thought, how the hell does he wrap around me like that? How does he position all of his defenders at once around me, squeeze me, and suffocate me? I literally feel like I can't breathe. Well, it's from using these techniques. We then have defending in the midfield, and this entails maintaining shape, running up and switching off, which will be repeated constantly in this defensive process, as well as tracking your opponent, as this is the only area on the pitch where there will be significant amount of runners making runs in behind your defensive line. First up, we have maintaining shape, and specifically in the midfield, this is super important. Maintaining shape involves a technique very similar to the first of the former defending breakdowns in the opponent's half, though instead it's about maintaining the defensive structure of your formation rather than high pressing the opponent and the ball carrier. This ensures there are minimal gaps in the defense. And what this will essentially entail you doing is right stick switching. Again, come off the hour, come off the technique. It is super important that you implement right stick switching into your game, specifically if you want to be a world-class defender. You see, to maintain shape, you need to switch constantly between your defenders to maintain whatever defensive formation shape you have in your defense. So if you have a 4-4-2, it's significant that you're able to switch between your defenders and keep them in that 4-4-2 shape. And why this is important is because people fall into the trap of running a singular defender out of their position, leaving a gap or hole in the defense and compromising the defensive structure. That is why it's significant to continuously switch between the defenders every single second. And you'll see this in a pro game at a high caliber level. They are constantly switching between their defenders, and each second goes by, they will have a new defender pushing up and putting pressure onto that opponent. We then have the run up and switch off repeat technique. Now it's a little bit different to the initial run up and switch off technique in defending in your opponent's half, simply because you're not wanting to be as aggressive compared to in your opponent's half. As I said, it's about maintaining shape. So when you are actually switching between the defenders to maintain that shape, you are wanting to run up slightly, a meter or two in game, and then switch off. What the run up slightly does is it essentially puts pressure onto the opponent to force him to do something. So we're just switching between our defenders and keeping them simply straight in their position without moving them at all. Your opponent's going to stand there and wonder what you're doing. But if you run up slightly, then switch off, run up slightly, switch off, all while maintaining the defensive shape, will put pressure onto him and a lot of the time will force the mistake. Last but not least, you do have tracking runners. Now this is the number one priority when it comes to midfield defending, because if you don't track, your opponent will get in behind every single time. It incorporates right stick switching and switching to the defender who is closest to the ball runner, to the runner making the run in behind the defense. So ensure when you are defending, maintaining that shape, switching off and repeating, that you are also not being so tunnel visioned and only focusing on the ball carrier and the attacker on the ball, but that you're also looking around for runners making runs in behind. Last but not least, defending around the box. The area of the pitch which is the most dangerous, and it seems the most people have the most issues with. If you were unsuccessful in stopping your opponent with the aforementioned techniques, this is where it counts to come in clutch. But defending around the box, it entails the ability to switch in tight spaces around the 18-yard box, keeping defensive shape and defenders in their position, and facing up with the centre back. This will entail ensuring you switch to a centre back early. Yet again, everything here incorporates right stick switching. You see, when you are around the 18-yard box, your ability to switch between defenders who are very close together is super important, because around the 18-yard box, your opponent is playing around attempting to find the gaps and the holes. And if you can't tightly switch between defenders and maintain that shape, then he will easily find gaps to exploit in your defense. However, if you practice starting from now, switching between the defenders constantly with the right stick, back, forth in tight areas and practicing this, whether that be in squad battles, kickoff, or even in an online game, then you will benefit from this technique tenfold. You need to ensure that you essentially don't give up any gaps or spaces and that you keep the defenders in their position. If you do this and if you constantly switch between the defenders, you won't give up any holes or gaps because you will keep that tight line as you push up and put pressure onto the ball carrier. But then I have keeping defensive shape and plays in the position. Yet again, very similar to what I was saying before about tightly switching between defenders. You need to keep the defensive shape, run up slightly, but then switch off to ensure you keep them in their defensive line. And last but not least is facing up with the centre back. You see, you may have thought throughout this whole entire defensive process that we have been rather passive in the defence, and although this is a more passive way of defending and it has never been more necessary in a year where any gap or space found in the attack is very easy to exploit, but it is so significant that you don't be passive when it comes to your opponent finding a ball into the striker, specifically around the 18-yard box. And I say this because if you do not select the centre back to face up key technique around the box, then you will lose out every single time because the AI is not capable enough defending for you. So when there are balls being put into the striker, ensure that you are selecting the centre back to face up and you're keeping in line with him without overcommitting. So there you have it, how to defend in every single area of the pitch. If you take a look at my gameplay as well as professional EAFC gameplay, you will see every single one of these techniques being put into play and perfected because pros have been working on these techniques for decades to ensure that they can keep up with the next year and the next year and the next year. These are the so-called basics of high caliber defending, and if you perfect them, you won't have any issues defending at all in any area of the pitch. And what is rather obvious about the three different strategies of defending in the AFC 24 is the further your opponent gets down towards the goal, the less aggressive you should be with your defensive strategy. And this is so there are minimal gaps left in the danger area, simply because gaps and spaces are easy to exploit this year, and pressing high up the pitch is valid only because you have some sufficient amounts of time to recover if you so as to overcommit in the defense. Now, of course, this didn't entail any jockeying technique, slide tackling technique, or even any header clearing techniques, but that's simply because they've all been taught on the channel. I've done tutorials including finding the most overpowered jockeying technique, so check them out. The link is down below, because if you did enjoy this video, you may enjoy this one here. I'm also coaching one-on-one, so check that out. The link is down below, and you can work one-on-one with me. If you enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. And lastly, if you do want any pre-gaming fuel or supplement, then head over to atpscience.com, which is the first link in the description, and use the code DylanEtsATP at checkout to get yourself a discount. Not only is it the cheapest way to get supplements, but it helps me out a ton, guys, so thank you.